This movie we're making now is not real life. But at the same time, it's not a send-up, and it's not an imitation of anything. Her torch is going out. The snakes are even closer to her now. Indy climbs to the head of the statue. He braces his back against the wall and puts his feet on the arm. I had been looking for action-adventure. I'd been looking to do something that would take me globe-trotting. And that was one of the things I told George Lucas when I spent time with him in Hawaii in '77, which was, I really want to make a globe-trotting movie like James Bond. So I had that in my appetite. It was on my sort of horizon that by hook or by crook, I would somehow make a kind of international movie involving action and chases and big set pieces and a fantastic John Williams score. I just didn't quite know. You know, I had the template, I didn't quite have the carrier pigeon. And until George mentioned this idea that he had about Indiana Jones.
It all really comes down to what I want to see. And Raiders especially was one that I just wanted to see the movie. I thought when I was working on Star Wars and I came up with the idea, I said, oh, this will be a fun movie, but I can't do it because now I'm going to do Star Wars and that's going to be my action-adventure movie. And so I was constantly trying to get somebody else to do it just so I could see it.
I just really expressed to George my desire to, you know, make a movie that I had been raised on, the kind of film that really had attracted, you know, my attention as a kid growing up, which was these spectacular international adventure stories that were mainly represented by these very cheaply made, low-budget black and white Republic serials. That was the idea.
Good. I just didn't understand.
We agreed a lot on movies and had the same aesthetic. And generally, I'm not crazy about working with my friends because, you know, it's like anything else. You can sort of damage your friendship that way. But Stephen and I are so simpatico that it was very easy for us to work together.
And so the movie came together really fast.
Raiders of the Lost Ark was a very strong idea. You know, the basic of the idea was, you know, action adventure, cliffhanger, you know, looking for a supernatural artifact, the character of Indiana Jones as this kind of fallen archaeologist that was kind of always over his head. Once those were set, then the process of coming up with a story, the specifics of the sequences and things that actually happened to him in the process of this adventure were fun.
And what came out of Larry Kasdan's typewriter was even a better version of the movie that we pitched out in those 3 or 4 days of story meetings that I had with George and Larry Kasdan. But I think that's where it was born, and that's where it will always remain, at least in my memory, that film came to life, not so much even on the sound stages or on location, but the film came to life in the story writing process. And we all pretty much stuck to the script that we were given.
Indiana Jones.
It was inconceivable to me that we wouldn't find the right actor to play Indiana Jones, even though Harrison Ford wasn't even being talked about in those days. It was this actor, it was that actor, it was eventually Tom Selleck, and then Tom was preempted from doing our movie after we cast him because of a CBS show that we all know called Magnum P.I. And then I had just seen a cut of Empire Strikes Back and said to George, that's Indiana Jones right up there, Han Solo. Why can't he do it? And George said, no. I got my hands full with Harrison just playing Han Solo. I don't want to, you know, he's identified as Han Solo. Let's leave him as Han Solo. And I said, yeah, but he's an actor. Actors play hundreds of different characters in their lifetimes. I think he'd be a great Indiana Jones. And that's sort of how the whole process began with Harrison. That's what I told George when I first accepted the project. I said, I'll do the movie, but I'm going to shoot it real fast.
Right.
This isn't, we're not going to do 20 takes on a 14-inch dolly shot. And we're not going to spend time getting the girl's hair out of her eye every shot. I was desperate when I made Raiders of the Lost Ark because I was coming off a movie that went wildly over budget and schedule, 1941, Close Encounters, wildly over budget and schedule. And Jaws, of course, went 100 days over schedule and was almost 2.5 times the initial budget. And so I really was ready to turn over a new leaf. And Raiders was my chance to prove to myself that I could make a movie, responsibly, economically, and under schedule and under budget. And so that's what I set out to do, with a little help from my friend George Lucas, who's a tremendous producer, and gave me a lot of hints and pointers on how to be prepared and how to prepare myself to be able to do this picture responsibly. So in a way, I had a lot to prove to myself after these movies that were very they were successful, but they were a little bit capricious. At least I was capricious in my looking at my budget and schedule and saying, I'm going to need more days, more time,
Friday night. If we don't get this, we don't get the shot.
If we don't get the shot, we don't get the movie.
If we don't get the movie, we're all up a creek.
Indiana Jones was always meant to be a B movie. It was always meant to be a kind of low-cost movie.
And so by shooting a very lean movie, where I was actually in the cutting room saying, oh, I wish I had gotten that coverage. How do I speed this up? I don't have a cover shot. I don't have that cutaway, so I can't cut out those 15 seconds. What am I going to do? It was challenging, but it was a great object lesson, because by the end of the movie, I had made the picture for about 15 or 16 days under the 84, 85-day schedule. And I had made it for exactly the budget that we had committed going in. And so, I wasn't thinking about making any kind of a movie that was a classic or any kind of a movie that was going to be a huge success, although I was thinking about making a film the audience would like. But I was trying to make a movie that was fiscally responsible.
Raiders of the Lost Ark was a dream for me. The script came out better than I could possibly imagine. Steven, when he started directing, it came out even better than the script. But every step of the way, it was getting better and better and more fun and more exciting. And of all the movies I've made, it's the one that was the most fun of all.
Well, I think with the exception of The Shark and Jaws and E.T., I've only made a couple of movies where I can put the silhouette of the leading character up on the screen, just the silhouette, and people immediately know where that came from.
Marion, don't look at it. Shut your eyes, Marion. Don't look at it no matter what happens.
In Raiders of the Lost Ark, Bellick's head blows up, Dietrich's head shrinks, and Tote's head melts, right down to the skull. And so, I said, fine, how are we going to do this? I had no idea how we were going to pull this off. So I certainly had the actors pose in the different positions. I had Bellick scream, I had Tote scream, I had Dietrich scream, and that's all ILM had. And it was up to them to go off and bring back to me an effect that was suitable. And I was amazed, especially at the melting head. I thought that was one of the most amazing effects I'd ever seen. And I love as the hat no longer fits him, but comes lower and lower and lower as the face drops away. It's pretty gory, pretty gross, but I love that effect.
When it was brought to me and said, let's do the melting bit on it, I kind of said, okay, there's got to be a way to do that. I'd never done it before, hadn't really done anything like it before. I didn't know anybody who'd done anything like it before. And the interesting thing is the guys at Kerner Optical, which is the sort of model shop, creature shop, now separated from ILM, they're going through a simplified version of what I did to illustrate the basic steps of the process. And they'll be doing the casting an actor to get the negative mold, they'll be doing an underskull, they'll be doing the layers of gelatin to get the same basic effect. But I'll be very interested to see how they deal with it, because it was a challenging shot.
Okay, here we go. This is a rehearsal. Laughing and turning, Ronnie.
The shot required Ronnie Lacey to have a facial cast, and I've had that done myself, and it's no fun. It's basically You're putting this goop on your face, this rubber material.
The original makeup man on the show would have used a material we call alginate, which is a material that dentists use a lot to take impressions of teeth, only we use it to take entire impressions of the head.
Yeah, there you go.
Perfect.
So once they get that facial cast, then you have to go in and sculpt and fix and open the eyes and put eyes there and all this kind of stuff. So it was a very trepidatious experiment.
Basically what I did was I took the negative mold, which was the face of the character, and the underskull had to be made out of stone to withstand the heat. And I had to sculpt it to actually sort of match the negative image of the character. And then I left a space in there for the dimension of the skin. I had worked with gelatin before and knew that it melted at a was still very thick. So I decided to go with that. And what I developed was a formula for the gelatin so that it was extremely delicate. It melted at a very low temperature, but it also didn't last very long, which caused a lot of concerns. And the way it worked was that I painted in very thin layers of gelatin every step of the way, each one a little bit different color, and as I did so, I would layer in veins. Some veins were made out of literally colored yarn soaked in gelatin, so that there was stuff that would be dripping off and falling off as it happened. When we did the actual effect, it wound up being 2 propane space heaters headed straight on it, and I was underneath it with a heat gun with this hot gelatin dripping down on me, kind of like, oh, that needs to melt a little quicker over here, and so really making moment-by-moment adjustments. Even though I got the gelatin melting fairly quickly, it still was a long process. It still melted for, I think it was 10 minutes or something like that, 8 or 10 minutes maybe. And so they had to speed it up in the lab. We did the shot. It went pretty darn well, actually, I thought, because I'd only done maybe 3 or 4 full tests of different gelatin mixes before I got to this one. But the other ones just melted all wrong and fell off before they were melted. And so we got really lucky on that take, and everything worked really well. And it seemed to be a pretty effective shot in the film, so in the end I was happy with it. I cannot begin to tell you how many phone calls I got about that effect. Not just people who, really appreciate it or fans or whatever, but a lot of other makeup men, because everybody wanted to melt a head somewhere. And they went, so how did you do it? What was the formula? And I'm like, I should have just published it somewhere and, let everybody know that way, because I still get people who say, I love that effect. How did you do that? And, it's been a long time. I think the most effective way to do the same effect today would be to do it practically the way I did it, but then computer enhance it afterwards, because there's a lot of stuff that shows up now. It shows the technique of what it was, but there's so much you can do with computers for cleaning up edges, smoothing things out, controlling compression, and a lot of the other elements that really, bring it up. But you could use the same techniques to give the basic information for a computer to really embellish.
I think that Tote's melting head is one of those images, once you've seen it, you never forget it. I mean, it's grotesque and it's hideous to think about it, but once it's in the mind, it'll never leave.
Everybody felt that this was going to be a successful movie. I mean, it was designed to be extremely entertaining, and, it seemed to work on that emotional level right, from the concept.
I think that when you make a movie that is popular and then goes almost beyond popularity and becomes part of the popular culture, you kind of tend to say, I guess that kind of got under the skin of, people who love movies. And that was one of the greatest, I think, aftershocks of making that movie. I began hearing the lines, and I began seeing kids playing Raiders games. I mean, it was really interesting to see that sort of happen.
It was a giant turning point in my career to be associated with the first movie, mainly because I was sandwiched between George and Stephen. And, certainly you hope that something great is going to come out of the relationship, and it certainly has. So when I look back on it, at the time it was very exciting, but it had to be a secret, so I couldn't tell anybody. I didn't even tell my mom that I was doing this, because George said, you can't tell anybody.
Stephen put this on my desk within maybe 3 weeks after we had finished the movie 1941. And I had moved in as his assistant, and he said, read this, it's my next movie, don't tell anybody about it. And I just kept going page by page by page, and it was incredible. It's still one of the best scripts I've ever read. And from that point on, it was a real ride.
You know why the character's called Dr. Indiana Jones? Indiana is the name of George's dog.
Everyone has a positive attitude when they do something like this, and you feel that you're doing the best job you can with it, or you hope you are. But I never anticipate success in that order of magnitude that the first three films achieved. I was surprised by it, I was delighted by it. And I was quite happy to do each of them as they came, more than happy. I had a great, great time doing all three of those films.
Just before you make that break, it's like consideration, and choose that over this.
Okay. I was, very young in the process. So for me, when I first read Raiders of the Lost Ark, I saw Casablanca in my head. I mean, I saw a movie like Casablanca, and it turned out, in a sense, to be, in Stephen's mind, much more of these kind of Saturday serial matinee kind of movies that he had grown up with. So I was quite stunned when I saw the film for the first time, what it looked like when it all came together.
It was 1981, so I was 18 years old, and it was so entertaining. And I was in Milwaukee. I grew up near Milwaukee, and went into Milwaukee to see some movie that was sold out, and they were having a sneak preview of this, which I'd never heard of, and so we said, well, let's see the movie with the funny title instead. So it was the perfect way to see a movie, because I knew nothing about it, never heard of it, and it was just great. It was so incredibly entertaining, but it was the first movie I saw where it occurred to me that someone wrote this, in this case Larry Kasdan. And not only did somebody write this, but they probably had a really great time at the office when they were doing it, because it just looked like such fun. And So it was sort of when I was starting to focus my thinking on being a screenwriter.
I didn't see it when it first came out. I left it a while. I think it was word of mouth said, hey, you should see this film, you know. And I went along and seen it, because you didn't really know what to expect. You knew it was kind of like one of those thriller, or it was a chase movie. Or, you know, I've never really gone to the pictures thinking about that. You just fancy a film.
I can't remember where I saw it. I have clear memories of seeing it. It was quite a sort of groundbreaking film, I think.
Was
the humour and the action coming together in perfect blend. You know, there are images that I still remember very clearly. I mean, it's lasted well.
I believe I saw Raiders pretty well when it came out. Somewhat against my will, I have to say, because it was completely contrary to everything that I was trying to do at the time and the films that I wanted to be, and I wanted the Nouvelle Vague to reach England. And I mean, looking at it again, certainly retrospectively, there is a great deal more to them than just a simple adventure. It deals with imagination, and it was a great creation.
You could get killed chasing after your damn fortune and glory!
Maybe. But not today.
Of course, you know, everyone in my primary school class wanted to kiss Harrison Ford, but I actually wanted to be Harrison Ford. I wanted to be Indiana Jones.
Well, my dad used to watch a lot of Westerns. We'd watch a lot of spaghetti Westerns. And other than that, I don't really remember my dad watching much of anything else, except for Indiana Jones. But I was really into it. You know, he was really into it. It was like a family get-together thing. And it's like that for a lot of families. Most of my friends who've seen Indy found it through their parents.
I have a lot of favorite scenes in the first Raiders film, but I think the scene that stands out for me the most is the basket chase.
I don't have one particular moment that I can nominate as my favorite. There are lots and lots of moments that I have enjoyed seeing again.
Not the man I knew 10 years ago.
It's not the years, honey. It's the mileage.
I just thought, you know, when he and Karen Allen were on screen together, it was just electric. It was utterly transporting.
You don't know what they've got there.
Well, I know what I've got here.
My favourite bit in that film was when the guy came out with the sword, giving it all the large. And he went on and on and on, and Harrison shot him, which I thought was kind of the thing he should do. It was simple, you know?
Indy shooting the guy with the scimitar instead of engaging in a bullwhip fight with him is just a moment of movie inspiration that will live forever.
I'm going after that truck. Oh. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
I have a lot of favorite scenes. I think that my favorite, which was the inspiration for the whole series in the end, was the truck chase. And him going under the truck with his whip and that whole thing, which is really where the concept of this whole thing started.
I think the best set piece for me in Temple of Doom is the scene where Indy gets caught in that crusher chamber where the ceiling is coming down and then the spikes come out of the hole. And Willie Scott is outside and Indy is trying to get her to find the release mechanism to reverse the crushing effect that's about to happen to him short round. And then she's got her hands full with bugs and she's panicking and freaking out over the bugs while he's trying to get her attention to put her hand in this really gross hole.
We are going to die!
That, to me, that cutting back and forth is my favorite scene in the entire movie.
He's such a man's man. He's the ultimate superhero. So when you put him in these vulnerable situations, it's hysterical. You watch Temple of Doom, anytime he get into a situation, short round, he's vulnerable. He's talking to a kid.
No mistake. I'm very little. She's very big.
Just any vulnerability with him is funny. He's really funny.
A favorite line? Gee, there's a lot of good ones.
It was in the script, but it was the way Harrison did it when he said snakes.
Why did it have to be snakes?
And then Solid comes in, which is an equally good line, I think. Larry Kasdan wrote and said, "Asps, very dangerous. You go first."
I know, the dialogue's so sparkling, you know. I mean, from the first movie, Indy's line with Marion, you know, I can only say I'm sorry so many times. And she says, well, say it again.
Do you know what you did to me in my life?
I can only say I'm sorry so many times.
Well, say it again anyway.
I just love that. The third movie, remember Connery's line, I should have sent it to the Marx Brothers. There's a million of them.
Shall we discuss this later? I should have mailed it to the Marx Brothers. Will you take it easy?
My favourite Indiana Jones film is The Crusade. Not just because Sean Connery was in it, not because of that reason, just the subject matter, you know? And it was the first one that actually tugged on your heartstrings a little bit for me. I remember at the end with the old knight standing there, who'd been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. I actually started crying. I think that got the emotions going that one. I kind of like that. And I like the whole thing about the father and son element in it, you know, of a son being brought to his dad and, you know, finding one another again. So that was my favourite one.
Keep looking down. Let Sean see you looking down.
But another aspect of this series that's been kind of interesting to me is that the number of filmmakers today, younger filmmakers, that come up to me and say, well, The Raiders of the Lost Ark was, you know, why I got in the movie business, and talk to me about how they watched it in film school and how they learned so much from it, how Steven shot that and the action sequences, and the rest is history.